I never imagined that after I sold my jewelry for his business, he made success and replaced me. But as I stood on the sidewalk outside the glass walled headquarters of Apex Innovations, clutching a cardboard box filled with 5 years of my life, I realized that some investments yield nothing but bankruptcy of the soul. Julian stood on the balcony 3 stories up, a flute of champagne in his hand, looking down at me like I was a smudge on his pristine view of the city. He wasn't alone. Wrapped around his arm, draped in silk that cost more than the car I was about to sleep in, was her, Sienna. She was 23, stunning, and wearing a diamond necklace that looked suspiciously like the one I had cried over when I handed it to a pawnbroker 4 years ago. He thought he had scrubbed me from his history. He thought that by changing the locks and canceling my keycard, he could delete the woman who built him. He forgot that you can't tear down the foundation without bringing the whole house down on your head. Before I tell you how I turned a discarded ex-wife into a corporate assassin, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. If you've ever poured your heart, soul, and bank account into someone who treated you like a stepping stone, pull up a chair. We have some scores to settle. My name is Clara, and 5 years ago, I was the only person in the world who believed in Julian Thorne. Back then, Julian wasn't the tech visionary of the year gracing the cover of Forbes. He was a frantic, brilliant, unemployed coder living in my one-bedroom apartment, staring at lines of code until his eyes were bloodshot. He had an idea, an AI-driven logistics platform that would revolutionize shipping. He called it Apex. I called it the money pit. We were drowning. I was working double shifts as an archivist at the City Museum, a job I loved but one that barely paid the rent. Julian refused to get a day job because it would distract him from his magnum opus. I supported us. I bought the groceries, I paid the internet bill that kept his servers running, and I smoothed his hair back when he had panic attacks at 3 a.m., telling him he was a genius and that the world would see it soon. But genius doesn't pay for server farms. The crisis came on a Tuesday in November. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that matched the mood in our cramped kitchen. Julian slammed his laptop shut, his face buried in his hands. "It's over, Clara," he moaned. "The angel investor pulled out. He says it's too risky. I need $50,000 by Friday to secure the patent and pay the initial server costs for the beta launch. If I don't, the code is useless. Someone else will beat me to market." He looked at me, his eyes wet with tears. "I'm a failure. I dragged you into this, and I have nothing to show for it." My heart broke for him. I believed in Apex. I had seen the way his eyes lit up when he talked about efficiency and algorithms. I knew he was on the verge of something great. "We'll find the money," I said, rubbing his back. "How?" he snapped, his despair turning sharp. "We have no credit, no savings. You've already maxed out your cards for the hardware. It's done." I looked at him, then I looked at the small velvet box sitting on top of our dresser. It was the one thing of value I owned. My inheritance. My grandmother, a woman who had fled war with nothing sewn into the lining of her coat but a set of jewelry, had left it to me. There was a heavy gold cuff with intricate filigree, a pair of sapphire earrings that caught the light like deep ocean water, and the centerpiece, a vintage Art Deco emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. It was my safety net. It was my history. "I have the money," I whispered. Julian looked up. "What? How?" I walked to the dresser and opened the box. The emerald glowed in the dim light. "This collection, it was appraised at $60,000 last year." Julian stood up, his face pale. "Clara, no, that's your grandmother's. You told me you'd never sell it. You said it was for our children." "I'm betting on us," I said, my voice trembling as I picked up the ring. It felt heavy and cold in my palm. "If Apex works, you can buy me 10 rings. If it doesn't, well, at least we tried." He grabbed my hands, kissing them feverishly. "I swear to you, Clara, I swear on my life, I will buy this back. I will buy you the Hope Diamond. You are the only partner I will ever need. We are doing this together, 50-50, always." I believed him. God help me, I believed him. The next day, I walked into a high-end pawn shop downtown. The smell of the place, metal, dust, and desperation, made me nauseous. The broker, a man with reptilian eyes named Mr. Vance, lowballed me. "45,000, he said, examining the emerald with a loupe. "Cash, today." It's worth 60, I argued, clutching the counter. Market's down, he shrugged. Take it or leave it. I took it. I walked out with a heavy envelope of cash and a lighter heart, leaving my family legacy in a dusty glass case. I gave the money to Julian. He didn't even count it. He just hugged me, then turned back to his computer and started typing. That was the turning point. Apex launched 3 months later. It didn't just work, it soared. A major shipping conglomerate licensed the software within 6 months. The money started pouring in, not thousands, millions. At first, it was exciting. We moved into a penthouse. Julian bought a Tesla. He bought tailored suits. But he didn't buy the jewelry back. Next month, babe, he'd say, checking his phone. Cash flow is tied up in expansion. We need to reinvest. Next month turned into a year, then 2, then 3. I quit my job at the museum to work for Apex full-time. I wasn't an engineer, but I was everything else. I was the HR department, the PR team, the office manager, and the emotional support animal. I planned the launch parties, I smoothed over rifts with investors, I designed the office aesthetic, I built the culture of the company. But I never signed an employment contract. I was the founder's partner. I didn't need a contract, Julian said. We were common law. We were a team. What was his was mine. Then, the drift started. As Apex grew, Julian shrank. The sweet, anxious man I loved was replaced by a titan of industry who checked his reflection in every window he passed. He started criticizing me. Do you have to wear that cardigan to the board dinner? He asked one night, adjusting his silk tie. It looks domestic. It's cashmere, Julian, I said, hurt. It looks tired, he sighed. Look, just try to look more like the brand, sharp, modern, expensive. He stopped coming home for dinner. He had late strategy sessions. He started traveling to conferences in Dubai and Tokyo without me. It's boring business stuff, Clara. You'd hate it. Stay here and redecorate the guest wing. I felt the distance growing, a chasm widening with every dollar that hit his bank account. But I stayed. I stayed because I had sold my grandmother's ring for this. I stayed because I had invested my youth. I fell victim to the sunk cost fallacy. I thought if I just loved him harder, if I just worked harder, the old Julian would come back. Then came the gala. It was the 5-year anniversary of Apex. We were celebrating a new valuation, $2 billion. The party was held at the wildest venue in the city, a converted cathedral decked out in lasers and ice sculptures. I had spent weeks planning it. I bought a new dress, a sleek silver gown that I thought Julian would approve of. I felt good. Tonight, I thought, he would acknowledge me. Tonight, he would finally announce our engagement. We had talked about it for years. I was standing near the bar, sipping tonic water, when the music died down. A spotlight hit the stage. Julian walked out. He looked magnificent, I have to admit. He radiated power. The crowd cheered. 5 years ago, he boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing through the hall. I was a guy in a garage with a dream. I had nothing but a laptop and a vision. I smiled, waiting for the "and Clara." I built this from the ground up, he continued, through grit, determination, and the refusal to accept mediocrity. Apex is the result of pure, unadulterated focus. My smile faltered. I was the focus. I was the funding. And tonight, Julian said, a grin spreading across his face, I want to introduce you to the future of Apex, a woman who embodies our new direction, innovative, fresh, fearless. Please welcome our new Chief Creative Officer and my fiancée, Sienna Miller. The room exploded in applause. My world went silent. Sienna walked onto the stage. I knew who she was. She was an intern we had hired 6 months ago. She was 23. She had been helping Julian with his social media presence. She walked up to him, her red dress flowing like liquid fire. Julian took her hand. He kissed her, and there, on her finger, was a ring. It wasn't my grandmother's emerald. It was a diamond the size of a grape. But around her neck, I gasped, dropping my glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Around her neck was my grandmother's sapphire pendant, the one I had pawned. He had bought it back. He had gone to the shop or sent an assistant and bought back my family heirloom, and he had draped it around the neck of his mistress. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. A cold, hard numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. I walked toward the stage. Security guards, men I had hired, men whose kids' birthdays I knew, stepped in my way. Miss Clara, the head of security, distinctively uncomfortable, mumbled. Mr. Thorne said, he said you shouldn't approach the stage. Get out of my way, Dave, I said. My voice was low, but it must have been terrifying because he stepped aside. I didn't go up the stairs. I stood at the bottom, right in Julian's eye line. He saw me. He paused mid-speech. He looked at me, then looked at the crowd, then looked back at me with a mixture of annoyance and pity. He leaned into the mic. Folks, enjoy the party. The music blasted back on. He grabbed Sienna's hand and led her off the back of the stage toward the VIP green room. I followed. I burst into the green room. Julian was pouring champagne. Sienna was admiring her ring. Clara, Julian sighed, putting the bottle down. I was hoping we could do this privately. Tomorrow, with lawyers. You gave her my necklace, I said. It was the only sentence I could form. Sienna touched the sapphires at her throat. Oh, this? Julian said it was vintage. It's a bit old-fashioned, but I think I can make it work with a restyling. Take it off, I whispered. Clara, stop, Julian snapped, stepping between us. It's just jewelry. I bought it. I own it, just like I own the company. I sold that jewelry to start this company, I screamed, the dam finally breaking. I fed you. I housed you. I sacrificed everything for you. And I paid you back, Julian shouted back. You've lived like a queen for 5 years. You haven't worked a real job since the museum. You rode my coattails, Clara. But let's be honest, you don't fit anymore. Look at you. He gestured vaguely at my silver dress. You're the garage phase. Sienna is the IPO phase. You're holding me back. You're always nagging me about ethics and work-life balance. I need a partner who runs at my speed. I am your partner, I said, tears streaming down my face. We are 50-50. You promised. I promised a lot of things when I was desperate, Julian sneered. But here's the reality. Your name isn't on the incorporation papers. Your name isn't on the patent. Your name isn't even on the lease for the apartment. You are a legal ghost, Clara. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Here, he said, tossing it onto the table. There's a check for $200,000 in there. That covers the jewelry, plus generous interest. Consider it a severance package. Get your things out of the penthouse by noon tomorrow. Sienna is moving in. I looked at the check. I looked at the man I had loved for 7 years. I looked at the girl wearing my history around her neck. I didn't take the check. I walked over to the table, picked up the envelope, and slowly, deliberately tore it in half, then in quarters. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. You think you can buy me out? I asked, my voice deadly calm. You think 200 grand covers my life? It's more than you're worth, Julian scoffed. Go back to the museum, Clara. Go dust off old things. That's where you belong. I'm leaving, I said, backing toward the door. But Julian, you made one mistake. And what's that? He laughed, pouring more champagne for Sienna. You think Apex is built on code, I said. You forgot it's built on data. And you forgot who organized the data archives for the first 3 years. So what? He rolled his eyes. We changed the passwords months ago. You changed the network passwords, I said, a dark smile touching my lips. But you didn't change the foundation. I turned and walked out. I walked out of the gala. I walked out of the building. And now I'm standing here on the sidewalk with my box of personal items, a framed photo of us from the garage days, my favorite mug, and a hard drive I pulled from the secure safe in my office before I came downstairs. Julian thinks I'm destitute. He thinks I'm a legal ghost. But he forgot about the dead man's switch. Back when we were starting, Julian was paranoid about corporate espionage. He made me create a physical failsafe, a master encryption key stored on a cold drive, just in case the cloud was compromised. He told me to hide it and never speak of it. Over the years, amidst the champagne and the ego, he forgot it existed, but I didn't. I looked down at the box in my hands. Buried under a scarf was a small black USB drive. This drive didn't just contain the source code. It contained the encryption keys for the entire Apex client database. Without this key, if the system rebooted or flagged a security breach, the data would turn into gibberish. And I knew exactly when the system was scheduled for its next mandatory update. Tuesday. I looked up at the balcony one last time. I could see Julian toasting the city. Enjoy the weekend, Julian, I whispered into the cold night air. Because come Tuesday, you're going to realize that the garage phase held the keys to the castle. I hailed a taxi. I wasn't going to a shelter. I was going to the one place Julian would never look for me, the one place where old things were valued and where silence was a weapon. I was going back to the museum, and I was going to bury him. The City Museum at midnight is a place of shadows and echoes, a sanctuary of forgotten things. It smelled of dust, old vellum, and the sharp tang of floor wax, a scent that calmed my racing heart instantly. I didn't need to break in. I still had my master key card from my days as the head archivist, a little plastic rectangle I had kept on my keychain out of sentimentality. Julian had stripped me of my access to the penthouse, the bank accounts, and the office, but he had forgotten that I had a life before him. He had forgotten that before I was Julian's girlfriend, I was a historian. I knew how to preserve things, and I knew how to bury them. I nodded to Elias, the night watchman who had worked the graveyard shift for 20 years. He looked up from his crossword puzzle, squinting through thick glasses. "Miss Clara?" he asked, surprised. "Haven't seen you in years. Working late?" "Something like that, Elias," I said, forcing a smile. "Just need to use the digital preservation lab for a few hours. Urgent project." "Go right ahead," he waved me through. "Coffee pot is on in the break room." I walked past the dinosaur skeletons and the Egyptian sarcophagi, down the spiral stairs into the basement archives. The Digital Preservation Lab was a windowless, climate-controlled bunker lined with servers and high-end workstations. I had secured the grant to build this place 6 years ago. It was soundproof, secure, and most importantly, it had a dedicated fiber optic line that didn't pass through the city's main grid. I sat down at the main terminal, the hum of the cooling fans the only sound in the room. I opened my cardboard box and took out the black USB drive. It looked so innocuous, a tiny stick of plastic. But as I plugged it into the isolated drive, I knew I was holding a nuclear warhead. I brought up the command prompt. The drive wasn't just a backup, it was the Genesis key. When Julian and I built the architecture for Apex, he was paranoid about hackers. He wanted a physical failsafe, a hardware key that had to be inserted into the mainframe once a month to verify the root admin status. If the verification failed, the system would assume a hostile takeover and initiate Protocol Zero, a total lockdown of the source code. For 5 years, on the first Tuesday of every month, I had quietly plugged this drive into the server room console while Julian was busy giving interviews. He never noticed. He thought the system ran on autopilot. He thought he was the genius who made it self-sustaining. He was wrong. I checked the logs on the drive. The last verification was exactly 29 days ago. The next verification was due tomorrow, Tuesday, at 9 a.m. If the key wasn't in the mainframe at Apex HQ by then, the $2 billion logistics platform that ran shipping for half the globe would freeze. Trucks would stop, ships would drift, and Apex stock would plummet faster than a stone in water. I leaned back in the chair, watching the cursor blink. I could stop it. I could email him the code. I could be the good woman one last time. Then I pulled out my phone. I had a notification from Instagram. It was Sienna. She had posted a story. She was in my penthouse, wearing my silk robe, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "New home, new life. So grateful for a man who treats me like a queen. Apex life, upgrade." A second photo showed her hand resting on Julian's chest. On her finger was the massive diamond. But around her neck, gleaming in the flash, was my grandmother's sapphire pendant. The rage that surged through me wasn't hot. It was liquid nitrogen. I turned back to the computer. I didn't just want the system to lock. I wanted to send a message. I opened the code editor on the USB drive. I couldn't change the Apex Live code from here. I wasn't connected to their servers, but I could modify the key itself. I could add a conditional parameter. I typed furiously for an hour. I added a new splash screen to the lockout protocol. When the system crashed tomorrow, it wouldn't just display a generic error 4004. It would display a prompt. Satisfied, I ejected the drive. I put it in my pocket. I curled up on the leather sofa in the lab, pulling my coat over me, and fell into a dreamless sleep. Monday morning broke with a deceptive calm. I left the museum before the day staff arrived, thanking Elias on the way out. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city using cash, bought a burner phone from a convenience store, and waited. By noon, the cracks started to show. I was sitting in a diner, nursing a black coffee, watching the news on the TV mounted in the corner. Apex stock was trading at an all-time high. Julian was on CNBC, looking handsome and arrogant. "The future is automated," he was saying, flashing his white teeth. Apex is about removing human error. It's about perfection. My burner phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. Clara, we need to talk. Where are you? It was Julian. He must have gone to the office safe to get the backup drive, only to find an empty slot where the USB used to be. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another text. This isn't funny. That drive is company property. If you don't return it by 5 p.m., I'm filing charges for corporate espionage and theft. I have lawyers, Clara. Don't make this ugly. I took a sip of my coffee. Ugly? He hadn't seen ugly yet. I typed a reply, "You have my jewelry. I have your brain. Fair trade." His response was immediate. His phone must have been glued to his hand. "The jewelry is mine. I bought it. The code is mine. I wrote it. You're a secretary, Clara. Stop playing games. Name your price. You want more money? Fine. 500K, cash. Just bring the drive, 500K. He was haggling. He still didn't get it. I turned off the phone. I wasn't going to negotiate. Not yet. I spent the afternoon at a public library monitoring the Apex internal chatter. I still had access to the employee Slack channels via a dummy account I had created years ago to test onboarding protocols. Julian had purged my official email, but he forgot about user test04. The panic in the engineering channel was rising. Dev lead, "Hey, has anyone seen the root key? The system is flagging a verification pending warning for tomorrow morning." Julian has it. He keeps it in the office safe. I asked Julian. He nearly bit my head off. He says he's handling it, but if that verification doesn't hit by 900, the kernel panics. We need to bypass it. Sysadmin, we can't bypass it. The encryption is hard-coded into the hardware layer. It's the dead man's switch. Who coded this? Julian did, back in the garage days. I smiled. They still gave him credit for my architecture. Tuesday morning, 8:55 a.m. I was standing across the street from the Apex Tower, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I looked like a tourist. I watched the building. It was a hive of activity, people rushing in with coffees, oblivious to the fact that the floor was about to drop out from under them. I checked my watch. 8:58 a.m. My burner phone rang. It was Julian. I answered. "Clara," he screamed. He wasn't smooth anymore. He sounded like a man falling from a plane. "Clara, please. We have 2 minutes. The system is locking up. The dashboard is turning red. Where are you?" "I'm watching you, Julian," I said calmly. "Bring the drive. I'll give you the jewelry. I'll give you the money. Whatever you want." "It's too late for the drive," I said. "You can't plug it in now. You're not at the server rack. You're probably in your office, panicking." "Tell me the override code," he begged. "There has to be a password." "There is," I said, "but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "I didn't set a password, Julian," I said softly. "I set a question." "What?" "Look at your screen," I hung up. High above the street, in the main operations center of Apex Innovations, the giant wall of monitors flickered. The maps of global shipping routes vanished. The stock tickers disappeared. Every screen in the building went black. Then a single text box appeared in neon green letters, flashing across every monitor, every laptop, and every phone connected to the company Wi-Fi. It wasn't a complex code. It wasn't a technical error. The text read, "System locked. Security question. Who sold their heritage to fund this company? Input answer to restore access." I could imagine the silence in that room. I could imagine the board of directors looking at the screen. I could imagine the engineers looking at Julian. And I could imagine Sienna standing there with my sapphire around her neck, realizing that the man she had stolen was standing on a trapdoor that I had just opened. Julian knew the answer. But typing it, admitting it to his entire staff, to his investors, to the world, that required a level of humility Julian Thorne didn't possess. I watched as the lights on the server floor of the building began to flicker. The chaos was starting. I turned around and started walking. I had a destination in mind. I wasn't going back to the museum. I was going to the pawn shop. Because if I knew Julian, he was about to become very desperate for liquid assets, and I wanted to be there when he tried to pawn his watch. But first, I stopped at a coffee shop. I ordered a latte. As I waited, I looked up at the TV screen. The news ticker at the bottom turned red. Breaking news: major system outage at Apex Innovations. Global shipping logistics halted. Stock plummeting. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like justice. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. but the satisfaction warming my chest was piping hot. I sat in the corner booth of the cafe, watching the chaos unfold on the flat screen TV mounted above the counter. It was a train wreck, and for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't the one trying to clean up the debris. I was the conductor. Apex Innovations stock is in free fall, the news anchor reported, her voice tight with professional panic. Trading has been halted by the SEC after a 40% drop in less than an hour. Major logistics partners, including FedEx and Maersk, are reporting a total blackout of their tracking systems. Trucks are idling, ships are drifting. The global supply chain is effectively paralyzed. On the screen, they showed live footage of the Apex headquarters. It looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. Security guards were trying to hold back a mob of reporters. Employees were streaming out the side doors, phones glued to their ears. And somewhere in that glass tower, high above the panic, Julian Thorne was staring at a computer screen that asked a question he couldn't afford to answer. Who sold their heritage to fund this company? My burner phone buzzed again. It wasn't a text this time. It was a call. I let it ring 3 times. Let him sweat. Let him explain to the board of directors why the AI visionary was being held hostage by a trivia question. I picked up on the 4th ring. Clara! Julian's voice was unrecognizable. It was a shredded, hysterical rasp. You are destroying everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? The FBI is in the lobby. The SEC is on line 1. You are going to prison for cyber terrorism. I'm not a terrorist, Julian, I said, calmly stirring my cold latte. I'm tech support. You seem to be having a login issue. Have you tried resetting your password? Stop it, he screamed. I could hear other voices in the background, angry, shouting voices. Just tell me the code or come here and fix it. I'll give you the check. I'll double it. 400,000. You still don't get it, I said. I don't want your money. I want the truth. Type the answer, Julian. Type it in front of your board. Type it in front of the investors. Tell them who paid for the servers when you were broke. Tell them whose grandmother's ring kept the lights on. I can't, he hissed, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Clara, listen to me. If I type your name, if I admit that, the IP lawyers will eat me alive. I signed affidavits stating I was the sole creator and financier. If I admit you funded the seed round, you have a claim to equity. It opens me up to perjury charges. It voids the insurance. You will bankrupt the company. Then I guess the company wasn't built very well, I said. Tick-tock, Julian. Every minute the system is down, you lose another million. How much is your pride worth? Give me the phone. A new voice barked on the line. Deep, authoritative, and furious. Who is this? I asked. This is Marcus Sterling, the voice boomed. Chairman of the board. Miss Clara, is it? Sterling, the money man. The shark who had poured $50 million into the Series A round. He was terrifying, ruthless, and exactly who I needed to talk to. Hello, Mr. Sterling, I said. I apologize for the disruption to your portfolio. Cut the crap, Sterling growled. Julian tells me this is a disgruntled ex-girlfriend situation, Dad. He says you planted a logic bomb. I have federal agents standing next to me ready to trace this call. Give us the unlock key, and maybe, we don't press charges. It's not a bomb, Mr. Sterling, I said, leaning back in the booth. It's a security protocol, the dead man's switch. Julian designed it. I just updated the security question, and Julian knows the answer. He just refuses to type it. Is that true? I heard Sterling ask away from the phone. Julian, do you know the answer? It's complicated. I heard Julian stammer in the background. If I type it, it compromises the legal standing of the... I don't give a damn about legal standing, Sterling roared. We are bleeding $10 million a minute. Type the damn answer. I can't, Julian wailed. It admits liability, I smiled. Julian was caught in a trap of his own making. If he typed my name, he admitted fraud. If he didn't, the company died. Mr. Sterling, I said into the phone, I can make this go away. I can come down there and override the protocol manually. I have the hardware key. Then get down here, Sterling demanded. Now. No, I said. I'm not coming to the office. Julian has security guards who are very eager to tackle me. We meet on neutral ground. Name it. Vance's Pawn Shop, I said. 4th and Main. 1 hour. A pawn shop? Sterling scoffed. Are you serious? Deadly, I said, and tell Julian to bring the jewelry, all of it, the ring, the earrings, the cuff, and the pendant. If one stone is missing, the system stays locked forever. He'll be there, Sterling said, and so will I. The line went dead. I left the cafe and walked the 6 blocks to Vance's. The city felt different now. The traffic was heavier, probably because the traffic light algorithms, which relied on Apex data feeds, were glitching. People were looking at their phones, frowning. The invisible web that held the world together had snapped, and I was holding the spool. I walked into the pawn shop. Mr. Vance looked up from his newspaper. He looked exactly the same as he had 5 years ago. Greasy hair, suspicious eyes, cigarette hanging from his lip. "We're closed," he grunted. "I'm not here to sell, Mr. Vance," I said, walking to the counter. "I'm here to collect. Remember me? The emerald ring? 5 years ago?" He squinted. "Maybe. I see a lot of rings." "You're going to see it again in about 20 minutes, I said, "along with the billionaire who bought it back from you. And his boss. You might want to lock the front door after they come in. It's going to get crowded." Vance looked at me, then at the TV in the corner where the Apex logo was burning in red. He connected the dots. "You're the girl," he wheezed, a hacking laugh rattling his chest. "The one on the news. The hacker." "I prefer archivist," I said. "Can I wait here?" He gestured to a stool. "Be my guest. This ought to be good." 30 minutes later, a black SUV screeched to a halt outside. Then another. The door chimes jingled aggressively. Julian burst in first. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His tie was undone, his hair wild, sweat staining the armpits of his $1,000 shirt. Behind him walked Marcus Sterling. He was a silver-haired lion of a man in a navy suit that cost more than the entire pawn shop inventory. He looked calm, but his eyes were murder. And behind them, Sienna. She was dragging her feet, her mascara running, clutching a velvet pouch. She looked terrified. "We're here," Julian panted, slamming his hands on the glass counter. "Now fix it! Fix it now!" "Hello, Julian," I said, not moving from my stool. "You look stressed. Have you tried meditation?" "Sienna posted about a great retreat last week." "Shut up," Julian screamed. "Just shut up and give me the key." "The jewelry," I said, holding out my hand. Sterling turned to Sienna. "Give it to her." Sienna stepped forward, her hands shaking. She opened the pouch and dumped the contents onto the scratched glass counter. There they were, the gold cuff, the sapphire earrings, the pendant Sienna had worn just last night, and the ring. My grandmother's emerald. Seeing them there, piled like pirate treasure in a dusty shop, hit me harder than I expected. I reached out and touched the cool metal of the cuff. It felt like shaking hands with a ghost. "It's all there," Julian spat. I stripped it off her in the car. "Are you happy? You got your shiny rocks back. Now unlock my company." I picked up the ring. I slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I felt a surge of strength, as if my grandmother was standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. "I'm not happy, Julian," I said, looking him in the eye. "I'm vindicated. There's a difference." I looked at Mr. Vance. "Do you have a laptop I can use?" Vance pulled a battered Dell from under the counter. "Wi-Fi is spotty, but it works." I opened the laptop. I logged into the Apex remote admin portal. The screen was black, save for the green text. Who sold their heritage to fund this company? "Type it," Julian commanded. "Type your name and end this." I looked at him. "I told you, Julian, I'm not typing my name." "What?" Sterling stepped forward. "You said if we brought the jewelry, you'd unlock it." "I said I would fix the login issue," I corrected. "I never said the answer was my name." I turned the laptop so they could see the screen. "You see, Julian," I said, my fingers hovering over the keys. "You were so obsessed with erasing me, you forgot the specific wording of the question. Who sold their heritage?" I typed. "CLARAVANCE." The screen flashed red. Access denied. Julian froze. "But you did sell it. It's you." "I sold the jewelry," I said softly, "but I didn't sell my heritage. I reclaimed it. The person who sold their heritage, who sold their soul, their history, and their honor for this company." I backspaced. "That was you, Julian." I typed JULINTHORNE. The screen flickered. A loading bar appeared. System restoring, 10%, 20%. The room went dead silent. Julian stared at the screen, his mouth open. "You set the answer to me?" He whispered. "You sold everything that mattered," I said, closing the laptop. "You sold us. You sold your integrity. You sold the only person who actually loved you for a higher valuation. You are the answer, Julian. You always wanted to be the center of everything. Congratulations. You are." The phone in Sterling's pocket buzzed. He checked it. Systems are coming back online, he said, his voice flat. Trucks are moving, the stock is stabilizing. He looked at Julian. Then he looked at me. That was a neat trick, Sterling said. You held the world hostage with a riddle. I just wanted what was mine, I said, sweeping the jewelry into my purse. You realize, Julian said, a manic glint returning to his eyes now that the crisis was passing. You realize that by typing my name, you just admitted that I am the sole source of the company's funding? You just codified it in the system logs. You proved my point. I own it all. You have nothing. No equity. No claim. He started to laugh, a shaky, jagged laugh. You played yourself, Clara. You got some old jewelry, but you just signed away your leverage. I'm still the CEO. I'm still the billionaire, and you're just the ex. Sienna let out a little breath of relief, sidling back up to Julian. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. You're right, Julian, I said. I did confirm you as the sole owner. I cleared up the liability issue. The board should be relieved. Sterling nodded slowly, watching me with calculating eyes. But, I added, pausing at the door, I didn't do it for free. We gave you the jewelry, Julian shouted. The jewelry was the entry fee, I said. The price of the lesson is what comes next. What comes next? Julian sneered. You gonna sue me? Good luck. No lawsuits, I said. But Julian, did you check your email? The one linked to the root admin account? What? When the system rebooted, I said, smiling, it executed a script. A dead man's switch doesn't just lock a door, Julian. Sometimes it opens a window. What did you do? Sterling demanded, stepping toward me. I set the system to auto-email the development history logs to the entire investor list upon a successful reboot, I said. Not the polished logs you show the SEC. The raw logs. The ones that show the timestamps of every line of code written between 2018 and 2020. Julian's face went the color of ash. The ones, I continued, that show that 70% of the core algorithm was written by user Clara V, while user Julian T was logged into World of Warcraft. You didn't, Julian whispered. I did, I said. It's in their inboxes right now. The metadata, the IP addresses, the chat logs where you asked me how to fix the recursive loops because you didn't understand the math. I looked at Sterling. You invest in genius, Mr. Sterling, I said. You might want to check who actually has it. Julian is a great salesman, but he hasn't written a working line of code in 4 years, and now everyone knows it. Sterling's phone buzzed again, then a flurry of vibrations. He pulled it out. He read the email. He looked at Julian with an expression that could peel paint. Julian, Sterling said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Why does this log show that the patent application was filed from a computer registered to Clara Vance? Julian backed away, bumping into the glass display case. It's a lie. She hacked it. She forged it. Metadata doesn't lie, I said. Good luck with the board meeting, Julian. I hear they can be brutal. I pushed open the door of the pawn shop. The bell chimed, a happy, cheerful sound. Clara, wait! Julian screamed, lunging after me. Sterling grabbed him by the collar of his expensive jacket and slammed him back against the counter. We aren't done, Julian, Sterling roared. I walked out onto the sidewalk. The sun was breaking through the clouds. The city was moving again. Trucks were rolling. The world was turning. I touched the emerald on my finger. I had walked into the lion's den with a cardboard box and a broken heart. I was walking out with my legacy, my dignity, and the satisfaction of knowing that the king of tech was about to be dethroned by his own investors. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized weeks ago. City Museum Archives, Elias answered. Elias, I said, don't lock the loading dock. I have a delivery coming. A delivery? Yes, I said, hailing a cab. I'm bringing in a new exhibit. We'll call it The Rise and Fall of a Narcissist. And Elias, call the board of directors at the museum. Tell them I'm ready to accept that director position they offered me last year. I have some new ideas on how to secure our funding. I got into the cab. Where to? The driver asked. The future, I said, and step on it. The days following the confrontation at the pawn shop were a blur of vindication, broadcast in high definition across every financial news network in the country. I sat in my new office, the director's suite on the top floor of the City Museum, watching the empire I had built crumble on a muted television screen. The headline on Bloomberg was brutal and succinct. The Emperor has no code. Apex Innovations founder under SEC investigation after data leak reveals fraud. I swiveled in my leather chair, a chair that smelled of beeswax and history, not plastic and ego. On my desk sat a simple nameplate, Clara Vance, museum director. I had accepted the job 20 minutes after leaving the pawn shop. The board was thrilled. They needed a steady hand and someone who understood that value wasn't just about stock prices. I was happy here. It was quiet. It was honest. But the world outside wasn't done with me yet. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. I hadn't blocked Sienna yet. Part of me, the petty part I was learning to embrace, wanted to see the fallout. It was a photo of a packed suitcase and a first-class ticket to Bali. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself. Walking away from toxicity and lies, self-love, single, not my drama." I laughed out loud. The upgrade had lasted exactly 48 hours. As soon as the credit card stopped working and the FBI started seizing assets, Sienna had packed her bags. Julian was alone. He was alone in the penthouse I had decorated, surrounded by subpoena papers and the silence of a phone that no longer rang with praise. Well, almost alone. Director Vance? Elias, the night watchman who was now my head of security, poked his head into my office. "There's a gentleman here to see you. He says he doesn't have an appointment, but he insists it's a matter of national security, or at least financial security." "Is it Julian?" I asked, not looking up from the grant proposal I was reviewing. "No, ma'am. It's an older fella. Looks like he owns the bank, not the one robbing it." "Marcus Sterling. Send him in, Elias," I said, "and leave the door open." Marcus Sterling walked into my office like he owned the building. He was wearing a fresh suit, but the lines around his eyes were deeper than they had been in the pawn shop. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had lost $1 billion in 3 days. He didn't sit down. He walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline, where the Apex Tower loomed like a dark, jagged tooth. "It's a mess, Clara," he said without preamble. "A complete and total disaster. The stock is down 70%. The SEC is talking about freezing the corporate accounts. Our major clients are triggering their breach of contract clauses. The company is bleeding out." "I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus," I said, capping my pen. "But I fail to see how that's my problem. I'm just a museum director. I deal in artifacts, not algorithms." He turned to face me. "Don't play coy. You know exactly what's happening." You pulled the thread and the sweater unraveled. "Julian unraveled the sweater," I corrected. "I just pointed out that it was made of polyester, not silk." Sterling sighed, finally sitting in the guest chair. "Julian is finished. The board voted him out this morning, unanimously. We invoked the bad actor clause. He's stripped of his title, Flex has, his salary, and his voting rights. He's currently meeting with criminal defense lawyers to see if he can avoid federal prison for fraud." "Justice is rarely swift," I said, "but it is satisfying." "Here's the problem," Sterling said, leaning forward. "We fired the fraud, but we still need the architect. The system is back online, yes, thanks to your little reboot, but the clients are spooked. They know Julian didn't write the code. They know you did. They saw the logs, and now they're demanding to know who is flying the plane." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. "We want you back, Clara." I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "We want you to return to Apex," Sterling said, his voice taking on the smooth cadence of a dealmaker. "Not as a ghost, not as a partner, as CEO." I blinked. "You want me to run the company?" "You built it?" Sterling shrugged. "You know the code better than anyone. The engineers respect you. I checked the internal chats. They call you the Oracle. The investors will calm down if we announce that the true founder has taken the helm. It's a great narrative. The woman behind the curtain steps forward. The press will eat it up. It turns a fraud scandal into a feminist victory story." He slid a folder across the desk. "Here's the offer. Base salary of $3 million. Stock options. A corner office. And full autonomy. You save the company, Clara, and you get rich doing it." I looked at the folder. It was everything I had wanted 5 years ago. It was validation. It was power. It was the 50-50 partnership I had begged for, multiplied by 10. I opened the folder. The contract was standard, but the numbers were staggering. "And Julian?" I asked. "What happens to him?" "He's out," Sterling said dismissively. "He retains a small percentage of non-voting shares, purely so he doesn't sue us for wrongful termination while we're vulnerable. But he's exiled. You'll never have to see him again." I ran my finger over the paper. It was a golden ticket. It was the ultimate revenge to sit in his chair, run his company, and sign his severance checks. But then I looked at the emerald ring on my finger. I thought about the museum. I thought about the piece I had found in the archives. No, I said, closing the folder. Sterling looked stunned. No? Clara, are you insane? This is $1 billion company. You're working in a basement with dinosaur bones. I'm working in a place that values truth, I said. Apex is poison, Marcus. It was built on a lie. Julian's rot is in the drywall. I don't want to spend the next 5 years cleaning up his mess just to make you richer. Sterling's face hardened. Everyone has a price, Clara. Name yours. I looked at him, and a thought occurred to me. A dark, ambitious thought. You're right, I said. I do have a price, but it's not money. What is it? I don't want to be CEO of Apex, I said slowly. I want to own Apex. Sterling laughed. You can't buy the company, Clara. Even with the stock crash, the market cap is $600 million. I don't want to buy it with cash, I said. I want to buy it with silence. What are you talking about? The email I sent with the development logs? I said. That was just the code history. It proved Julian didn't write the software. But I have another drive, Marcus. The financial archive. Sterling went very still. I was the office manager, remember? I said. I handled the invoices. I know about the shell companies Julian set up in the Caymans to funnel investor money into his personal lifestyle. But more importantly, I know that the board signed off on those audits. I know you signed off on them, Marcus. Sterling's face drained of color. You ignored the red flags because the stock was going up, I said. If I release the financial logs, Julian goes to jail for fraud, but you go to jail for negligence and conspiracy. The SEC will ban you from trading for life. Your firm will collapse. Sterling stared at me. The lion had met a tamer. You're bluffing, he whispered. I'm an archivist, I smiled. I keep everything. Do you want to see the PDF of the email draft? It's scheduled to send tomorrow at noon. Sterling loosened his tie. He looked at the folder on my desk. He looked at me with a new kind of respect, fear. What do you want? He asked hoarsely. I want Julian's shares, I said. All of them. I want him stripped of everything. Not just his job, his equity. I want him to leave that building with $0 to his name, and I want those shares transferred to a nonprofit trust dedicated to digital literacy and museum funding. And the company? Liquidate it, I said. Sell the assets. Sell the code to FedEx or Amazon. I don't care, but the brand Apex dies, and the proceeds go to the trust. You want to kill $1 billion company, Sterling said, aghast. Just to spite him? Not to spite him, I said, standing up. To correct the record. Apex was a mistake. It's time to delete it. Sterling sat there for a long time. He calculated the odds. He looked at his future, prison or poverty. If I do this, he said quietly, if I force Julian to surrender his equity, you delete the drive? I delete the drive, I agreed. And you get to retire quietly to the Hamptons instead of a federal penitentiary. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket. His hands were shaking slightly. You're more dangerous than he ever was, he muttered. He just wanted to be famous, I said. I just want to be done. Make it happen, Marcus. Have the papers on my desk by morning. Sterling walked out. I sat back down. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had just ordered the execution of a corporate empire. I picked up my phone. I had one more call to make. I dialed Julian. He answered on the first ring. He sounded drunk. What do you want? He slurred. You took my job? You took my girl? You want my kidney next? I just had a meeting with Marcus Sterling, I said. He's coming over to see you. He has some papers for you to sign. I'm not signing anything, Julian spat. I'm fighting this. I'm gonna sue you, Clara. Julian, I interrupted gently. It's over. You're going to sign the papers, and you're going to give up your shares. Why the hell would I do that? Because if you don't, I said, Marcus is going to let the feds see the Cayman accounts. He's going to turn state's witness against you to save himself. I gave him a choice. You or him. He chose himself. There was a silence on the line, a long, terrified silence. You can't leave me with nothing, Julian whispered. Clara, please. I built that life. I don't know how to be ordinary. You'll learn, I said. I did. It's actually quite liberating. Clara, he choked out. I loved you in the beginning. I really did. I know, I said, and for the first time, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for him, but for the time we lost. And I loved you enough to sell my past for your future. But you spent it all, Julian. The account is empty. What am I supposed to do? He asked, his voice breaking like a child's. I looked down at my grandmother's ring. The emerald shone deep in green, a symbol of survival. I hear the museum is hiring a janitor, I said. It's honest work. And Julian, the benefits are great. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights of the Apex Tower were still on, burning bright in the distance. But I knew that by tomorrow, they would be dark. I had reclaimed my jewelry. I had reclaimed my name. And tomorrow, I was going to turn a monument to greed into a legacy of learning. But there was one final loose end. I opened my drawer and pulled out the hard drive, the financial archive. Sterling thought I would delete it. Julian thought I would use it as blackmail. But an archivist never destroys history. I put the drive in a manila envelope. I addressed it to the Securities and Exchange Commission, anonymous tip line. I had promised Sterling I would delete my copy. I never promised I wouldn't send a backup to the authorities. After all, if I learned anything from Julian, it was to always read the fine print. I licked the envelope and sealed it. Part 5 is going to be a courtroom drama, I whispered to the empty office. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the night, leaving the door to the director's office wide open. The fall of Apex Innovations didn't happen with a whimper. It happened with the screech of tires and the heavy, authoritative pounding of FBI fists on mahogany doors. I watched it all from the comfort of my office at the museum, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea that tasted like pure vindication. The news helicopters were circling the Apex Tower like vultures, waiting for a carcass to cool, broadcasting the raid live to the world. It was a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after I had locked the system. I had always liked Tuesdays. They felt like days for getting things done. Marcus Sterling had thought he bought my silence with Julian's equity. He thought that by throwing the boy genius under the bus, he could drive away in his luxury sedan unscathed. But he made the same mistake Julian did. He underestimated the memory of an archivist. When I mailed that hard drive to the SEC, I wasn't just exposing a fraudulent CEO, I was burning down the entire corrupt village that raised him. I watched on the monitor as Julian was led out of the building in handcuffs. He wasn't wearing one of his bespoke Italian suits. He was wearing a gray hoodie, looking pale and small, shielding his face from the flashbulbs. But the real satisfaction came a moment later. A second team of agents led Marcus Sterling out. The Lion of Wall Street looked baffled, shouting at his lawyers, his face a mask of purple rage. He looked directly into the news camera, and for a split second, I knew he was looking for me. He realized in that moment of public ruin that the archivist hadn't just filed the paperwork. She had shredded the treaty. The trial of the century started 3 months later. It was a circus. The prosecution called it the Apex Ponzi. The defense called it a startup accounting error. I called it a front row seat. I attended every day. I didn't sit in the back. I sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table, wearing my grandmother's emerald ring. It caught the harsh courtroom lights every time I moved my hand, sending little green fractals dancing across the back of Julian's slumped shoulders. The star witness wasn't me, though. It was Sienna. The feds had caught up with her in Bali. Facing charges of aiding and abetting for helping Julian hide assets, she flipped faster than a pancake. She took the stand in a modest beige cardigan, a hilarious attempt to look innocent, and poured gasoline on Julian's pyre. Mr. Thorne told me the money was his, she wept, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He said Clara was just an obsessed ex-employee who was jealous of our love. He made me wear the jewelry. He said it was a trophy. I didn't know it was stolen heirlooms. I'm a victim here. Julian watched her with dead eyes. The woman he had replaced me with, the upgrade he had paraded on stage, was now hammering the final nails into his coffin to save her own skin. It was poetic. It was tragic. It was exactly what he deserved. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I walked to the stand with the posture of a queen entering her throne room. Ms. Vance, the prosecutor asked, holding up the black USB drive I had mailed them, can you tell the court what is on this drive? The truth, I said simply. That drive contains the metadata for every line of code written for Apex, and the financial ledgers for every dollar stolen from the investors. It proves that Julian Thorne didn't build the company, he marketed it. And it proves that Marcus Sterling didn't audit the company, he enabled it. Julian's lawyer tried to discredit me. He called me bitter. He called me a scorned woman. Miss Vance, the lawyer sneered, pacing in front of me. Isn't it true that you are simply angry that Mr. Thorne ended your relationship? Isn't this entire crusade just revenge for a broken heart? I looked at him, then I looked at Julian. I'm not angry, I said, my voice calm and carrying to the back of the room. I'm efficient. Mr. Thorne stole 5 years of my life and $60,000 of my family's heritage. I simply balanced the ledger. In the archival world, we call that a correction of record. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. The sentencing was the final act of the play. The judge, a stern man with no patience for Silicon Valley arrogance, gave Julian 20 years. Marcus Sterling, due to his position of trust and the scale of the negligence, got 12. As the bailiffs moved to take Julian away, he stopped. He turned to look at me. The courtroom was clearing out, but I hadn't moved. Clara, he whispered. His voice was raspy, stripped of all its charm. I stood up and walked to the railing. Goodbye, Julian. Was it worth it, he asked, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. You burned it all down. The company, the money, the legacy. We could have been rich. Even after we broke up, you could have taken a settlement. Why destroy it? I looked down at him, this man who had once been my world. Because you forgot the first rule of preservation. I said softly, if you build on rot, the structure collapses. I didn't destroy Apex, Julian. I just turned on the lights. The rot did the rest. I have nothing, he sobbed. No money, no name, no one. You have a lot of time, I said. Use it to learn how to code. I hear the prison library has decent computers. I turned my back on him and walked out of the courtroom. I walked out into the crisp autumn air of the city, taking a deep breath. It smelled of rain and concrete and freedom. But the story didn't end with a prison cell. It ended with a check. The liquidation of Apex Innovations was messy, but my deal with the government, as the whistleblower who provided the key evidence, protected the equity I had wrestled from Sterling before his arrest. When the assets were sold off to a competitor, the Clara Vance Trust received a payout. It wasn't $2 billion. After the fines and the restitution to the defrauded investors, it was closer to $50 million. But $50 million is a lot of money for a museum director. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't buy a mansion in the Hamptons. I bought the museum. Well, technically, I endowed it. I donated $40 million to the City Museum to establish the Vance Center for Digital Ethics and Preservation. We built a new wing dedicated to teaching digital literacy, coding, and the history of technology. We created scholarships for underprivileged girls who wanted to be engineers. Real engineers, not figureheads for narcissists. I kept $10 million for myself. I bought a brownstone in the historic district. I filled it with art, books, and silence. And I bought a safe, a heavy antique iron safe where I locked my grandmother's jewelry. I wore the ring occasionally, but the rest? It stayed hidden. It had done its job. It had bought a war, and it had won it. 6 months after the sentencing, I was in the archives, wearing white cotton gloves, examining a 17th century ledger. The silence of the basement was my favorite music. Director Vance? I looked up. Elias was standing there, looking nervous. Next to him stood a woman I didn't recognize. She was sharp, dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed government, and holding a briefcase. I told her you were busy, Elias said apologetically, but she flashed a badge. It's okay, Elias, I said, peeling off my gloves. Thank you. The woman stepped forward. Ms. Vance, my name is Agent Miller. I'm with the Department of Justice Cybercrimes Division. I leaned back in my chair. I've already testified, Agent Miller. The Apex case is closed. I'm not here about Apex, she said, setting the briefcase on my desk. I'm here about the dead man's switch. I raised an eyebrow. I don't know what you're talking about. We analyzed the code you used to lock the Apex system, she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. The recursive logic loop based on a semantic query? It was elegant, brutal, but elegant. Our tech guys had never seen anything like it. It bypassed military-grade encryption like it was tissue paper. I'm an archivist, Agent Miller, I said innocently. I just organize things. We have a problem. she said, dropping the pretense. There's a situation involving a cryptocurrency exchange in the Caymans. They're laundering money for a cartel. We have the servers, but everything is encrypted behind a biometric key held by a CEO who has gone missing. We can't crack it without destroying the data. And you want me to help you break in? I asked. We want you to help us find the back door, she corrected. We know you didn't just find the flaw in Apex. You built the flaw. You have a talent for seeing the cracks in the foundation that arrogant men ignore. I looked at the briefcase. I looked at my quiet, dusty archives. I had my vindication. I had my peace. I had my museum. But as I sat there, I felt a familiar hum in my blood. It was the same feeling I had when I stood in the pawn shop and watched Julian crumble. It was the thrill of the hunt. The thrill of being the smartest person in the room who nobody noticed until it was too late. I'm retired from corporate sabotage, I said. This isn't sabotage, Miller said. It's recovery. There are thousands of victims who lost their life savings in this exchange. People like you were 5 years ago. People who trusted the wrong visionary. That hit a nerve. I touched the emerald ring on my finger. If I do this, I said slowly, I do it my way. No badges. No official payroll. I'm a consultant, an external archivist. We can work with that, Miller nodded. We need a ghost, Miss Vance. And rumor has it you're the best ghost in the city. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I have a condition, I said. Name it. If we recover the funds, I said. 10% goes to the Vance Center. I have a new program I want to launch for whistleblowers. Miller hesitated, then extended her hand. Deal. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, but mine was stronger. Give me an hour to finish cataloging this ledger, I said, pulling my gloves back on. Then we can go toppling empires. Agent Miller walked out, leaving the door open. I turned back to my work. The dust motes danced in the light of the desk lamp. I wasn't just Clara, the ex-girlfriend, anymore. I wasn't just Clara, the victim. I was Clara, the curator. And I had just realized that the world was full of dirty secrets waiting to be cataloged, exposed, and filed away. I picked up my pen. I wasn't writing the end of my story. I was just turning the page to chapter 2. Julian was in a cage of steel bars. I was in a cage of my own making, but mine was made of gold, knowledge, and absolute power. And the best part? I held the only key. I looked at the empty space on the shelf where the Apex files used to be. Next, I whispered,